You are too accessible, too readable, too eager to please. You walk into a room and before a single word escapes your mouth your body language has already delivered a confession. Your shoulders tilt slightly forward as if asking permission to exist. Your smile appears before anyone has earned it. You nod along to opinions you quietly disagree with, performing agreement like an actor desperate to keep the audience entertained. When silence falls across the room you rush to fill it with harmless chatter because the quiet feels like a spotlight exposing your insecurity. You laugh when nothing is funny. You soften your tone when no threat exists. And the world notices. Human beings are experts at reading signals of dominance and submission. It is an ancient instinct wired deep inside the nervous system. Long before language existed, survival depended on recognizing who held power and who did not. That instinct still operates beneath every modern interaction. People do not need to be cruel to sense weakness. They simply need to be human. When they detect that you crave their approval, they unconsciously withdraw respect. They categorize you. They place you inside a psychological container. The agreeable one. The harmless one. The dependable servant. Once you are placed in that box, your presence becomes predictable, and predictability erases power. Yet there exists another type of presence entirely. A presence that does not beg for attention yet somehow commands it. A presence so calm and heavy that the atmosphere shifts when it enters a room. It is not loud. It is not theatrical. It does not perform dominance through noise or aggression. Instead, it carries a quiet gravity that bends the behavior of others. Conversations slow down around it. People measure their words more carefully. Even those who cannot explain why feel a subtle tension in the air. This form of confidence is not built on applause or admiration. It is built on self-ownership. It belongs to the individual who no longer needs the approval of the crowd because his identity is constructed internally rather than borrowed from the reactions of others. When someone builds his own internal kingdom, the opinions of the tribe lose their authority. Respect begins to form not because he demands it but because he does not require it. The philosophy of power has long understood this reality. Throughout history, the most formidable figures were rarely the most charming. They were the most controlled. They understood that admiration based on affection is unstable because affection changes with the wind. Respect rooted in psychological gravity is far more durable. It emerges when others sense that your decisions are not governed by their approval. Today we are not discussing empty motivational slogans or surface-level positivity. What follows is a deeper examination of the hidden leaks through which most people lose their authority every single day. Imagine placing your current personality under a microscope and performing a precise autopsy on its weaknesses. The objective is not cruelty toward yourself but clarity. Every habit that signals submission must be identified and replaced with habits that project sovereignty. Be warned before continuing. Once these shifts begin, the social environment around you will change. The easy familiarity of being the agreeable companion will gradually fade. Some people prefer the comfort of being overlooked because it protects them from responsibility and conflict. But those who wish to move the pieces rather than be moved must accept a different role. The transformation begins by recognizing a simple truth. Weakness rarely comes from a lack of strength. It usually comes from the unconscious leakage of power through behaviors that broadcast insecurity. Stop the leaks and pressure begins to build. When pressure builds, the entire dynamic of your presence changes. The first transformation begins with the quiet elimination of the nice persona. From childhood, many people are taught a deceptively comforting belief: behave nicely and the world will reward you with fairness and kindness. Reality is far more complicated. Politeness and cooperation are valuable traits, but when niceness becomes a survival strategy, it communicates submission before any negotiation has begun. People who rely on niceness as protection often discover that those willing to assert themselves move ahead faster. The issue is not morality but perception. Niceness performed for approval sends a signal that you fear conflict. When others sense that fear, they instinctively test its boundaries. True authority does not abandon courtesy, but it replaces needy niceness with disciplined civility. Civility is deliberate. It is a code you impose on yourself because you value order and self-control. The difference is subtle yet profound. The civil individual holds doors open, speaks respectfully, and behaves with composure not because he seeks applause but because he refuses to descend into chaos. Behind that calm exterior sits a boundary. He does not bargain for affection. When crossed, he does not explode with childish rage. Instead, the warmth simply disappears and a colder form of clarity replaces it. That shift alone unsettles people because it reveals that their approval is irrelevant to his standards. Another transformation occurs in the management of expression. Many people smile reflexively, using facial warmth as social insurance. Observe yourself for several days and notice how often your face broadcasts reassurance even when you feel neutral. This habit evolved as a signal of submission meant to show others that you pose no threat. When used constantly, it quietly erodes authority. Neutral composure, on the other hand, communicates that your emotional state is not controlled by the expectations of the room. The moment people realize they cannot easily read you, the power balance shifts. Mystery replaces predictability. And unpredictability is one of the deepest sources of psychological tension in human interaction. When this shift begins, others will react. They may ask if something is wrong or if you are upset. In truth, nothing is wrong. What they are experiencing is the discomfort of no longer receiving the familiar signals of submission they had grown accustomed to. That moment of confusion marks the first subtle transfer of power. You have stopped broadcasting your internal state like an open radio signal. Instead, you have become a closed book surrounded by people who have spent their entire lives being transparent. The next transformation concerns the strategic use of silence. Most conversations are driven by an almost desperate attempt to avoid pauses. Two insecure individuals speaking together often overlap, interrupt, and rush through sentences because they fear the quiet space between words. Silence feels like judgment to those who rely on constant reassurance. Yet silence, when used deliberately, becomes a powerful psychological force. It creates a vacuum and human anxiety rushes to fill it. When you pause before answering a question, the other person's mind begins constructing interpretations. Did they say something foolish? Did they offend you? Are you considering a deeper response? A pause of only a few seconds can completely shift the rhythm of a conversation. When you eventually respond at a measured pace, your words appear more deliberate and thoughtful. Fast speech often signals nervous urgency, while slow, controlled speech suggests that you expect the room to listen. This is not about theatrical intimidation but about reclaiming the natural tempo of authority. When interruptions occur, instead of escalating your volume, simply stop speaking and allow the silence to expose the interruption. The room will feel the imbalance and attention will return to you without conflict. In that moment, you have demonstrated control not through aggression but through composure. The next shift in power occurs when you dismantle your dependence on external validation. Modern culture trains people to treat approval as a form of emotional currency. Notifications, compliments, applause, and public recognition become small injections of reassurance that temporarily stabilize self-worth. The danger of this system is that whoever controls the supply of validation gains subtle control over your emotions. If praise elevates your confidence and criticism shatters it, your identity is no longer your own. It becomes a puppet dancing on invisible strings pulled by the opinions of strangers. True psychological strength begins when those strings are cut. This does not mean becoming indifferent to all feedback or isolating yourself from society. It means constructing an internal reference point for your value that cannot be adjusted by passing comments. Imagine a fortress built around your sense of self. Compliments may knock politely on the gates, and criticism may attempt to rattle the walls, but neither has the authority to redesign the structure. When someone praises you, it simply confirms what you already understand about your abilities. When someone insults you, it becomes merely data to evaluate rather than a verdict to obey. The absence of validation hunger creates a strange effect in social environments. People are accustomed to participating in an invisible exchange. I offer you approval and you return the favor. When someone refuses to participate in this trade, the interaction becomes unpredictable. Others try harder to impress, provoke, or analyze you in an attempt to regain control of the exchange. This moment becomes a test of discipline. If you react defensively to insults or eagerly to praise, you reveal that the old strings are still attached. The stronger response is composure. When confronted with criticism, the instinct of many individuals is to defend themselves immediately. Defense implies that the accusation has already struck a nerve. A calmer approach disarms the attack entirely. Sometimes agreement neutralizes the tension. If someone labels you arrogant, responding with calm acceptance removes the conflict they expected. Other times, simple indifference is enough. A brief acknowledgement followed by continued focus on your task demonstrates that their opinion holds no power over your direction. Nothing unsettles a provocateur more than discovering that their words failed to produce an emotional reaction. Another layer of authority emerges through posture and physical presence. The human body constantly communicates messages that the mind may not even realize it is sending. Closed posture, hunched shoulders, and minimized movements unconsciously signal vulnerability. Expansive posture communicates comfort within one's own territory. When someone sits upright, allows their shoulders to remain relaxed, and occupies space naturally, observers interpret the signal as confidence even before any conversation begins. The mind and body operate as a feedback loop. When the body adopts a position associated with strength, the brain gradually aligns its emotional state with that position. Eye movement plays an equally significant role. Many people glance around a room rapidly, scanning for approval or danger. These quick movements resemble the vigilance of prey animals searching for threats. A slower, more deliberate gaze communicates a completely different message. Instead of darting from face to face, the eyes settle on a person or object, gather information calmly, and then move smoothly to the next point of focus. This pattern suggests patience and control. Even walking through a crowded space can project authority when the movement is direct and purposeful. Individuals who move as if they have a clear destination naturally cause others to adjust their paths. Scarcity of attention forms the next principle. In a world saturated with constant communication, attention has become one of the most valuable resources a person can possess. Yet many people distribute it freely without realizing that overavailability reduces perceived value. Responding instantly to every message, accepting every invitation, and lingering in every conversation communicates that your time is inexpensive. Authority increases when your presence becomes selective. This does not mean withdrawing from society completely. It means understanding that availability should reflect priorities. Leaving an interaction while it is still engaging often leaves a stronger impression than staying until boredom arrives. Ending conversations with a simple statement that you have other commitments preserves mystery. The imagination of others begins to fill the gap you left behind. They wonder what occupies your time and attention. That curiosity subtly elevates your perceived importance. The same principle applies emotionally. Oversharing personal struggles with people who have not earned that level of trust dilutes your psychological boundaries. In a culture obsessed with constant disclosure, the individual who maintains privacy becomes unusually intriguing. However, tactics alone cannot sustain true authority. The foundation beneath every visible behavior must be genuine competence. Without skill and substance, even the most disciplined posture eventually reveals itself as performance. Real confidence grows from repeated evidence that you can handle challenges effectively. Each time you solve a difficult problem, master a demanding skill, or honor a commitment you made to yourself, your mind collects proof of your capability. That proof accumulates quietly until your internal narrative shifts from doubt to certainty. Competence also creates calm under pressure. Consider professionals who operate in high-stakes environments where hesitation can cause serious consequences. Their composure during crisis is not theatrical bravery but the natural result of preparation and experience. They have rehearsed the necessary actions so thoroughly that panic becomes unnecessary. The same principle applies to everyday leadership. When others sense that you possess knowledge and skill, they begin looking toward you during moments of uncertainty. Your words carry more weight because they are supported by demonstrated ability rather than empty confidence. The pursuit of competence requires curiosity and discipline. It means studying the dynamics of your field, learning from history, analyzing mistakes, and continuously refining your methods. When knowledge combines with restraint, your presence develops a quiet authority. People notice that you do not speak frequently, but when you do, the contribution is thoughtful and precise. Over time, this pattern builds a reputation. Eventually, others begin anticipating your perspective during complex discussions. That anticipation marks the transition from mere participant to influential figure. The final transformation demands the courage to accept misunderstanding. Many individuals sabotage their own authority because they fear being perceived as selfish or unkind. They attempt to satisfy every expectation placed upon them and in doing so surrender control of their time and priorities. Leadership of one's own life requires acknowledging a difficult truth: someone somewhere will always disagree with your choices. If you attempt to eliminate every negative opinion, you will eventually abandon your own direction entirely. Setting boundaries often triggers resistance from those who benefited from your previous compliance. When you decline a request or refuse to sacrifice your priorities, others may interpret the decision as arrogance. In reality, it is simply the recognition that your energy is finite. Every hour invested in one direction must be taken from another. Choosing your goals inevitably disappoints people who expected unrestricted access to your attention. Accepting this consequence is essential for autonomy. The willingness to appear as the antagonist in someone else's narrative frees you from constant justification. When you decline a request, you do not need to construct elaborate explanations. A simple statement that you are unavailable is sufficient. The individual who insists on an explanation is often attempting to renegotiate the boundary. By remaining calm and consistent, you demonstrate that your decision is final. Over time, others adjust their expectations accordingly. This shift does not require cruelty or indifference toward the well-being of others. Compassion and generosity remain valuable qualities when exercised voluntarily rather than under pressure. The key difference is that assistance becomes a conscious choice instead of a reflexive attempt to gain approval. Paradoxically, people often respect generosity more when it comes from someone who clearly has the ability to refuse. As these transformations accumulate, your interactions begin to change in subtle ways. Conversations become more deliberate. People listen more carefully because they recognize that your words are measured rather than impulsive. Silence around you no longer feels awkward but purposeful. Your posture communicates steadiness, and your movements convey direction. The environment gradually adapts to the new signals you project. The most significant change, however, occurs internally. The anxious voice that once demanded constant reassurance begins to fade. Decisions become clearer because they are no longer filtered through the question of how everyone else will react. Instead, they are evaluated according to your principles and objectives. This clarity creates a form of calm intensity. Others may interpret it as intimidating because it contrasts sharply with the fragmented uncertainty that dominates many social interactions. People who operate with this level of self-ownership often appear unusual because they are no longer assembled from borrowed expectations. Many individuals are psychological mosaics built from pieces of parental approval, cultural pressure, and past experiences. When they encounter someone whose identity appears unified and self-directed, it challenges their assumptions about what is possible. That contrast generates both admiration and discomfort. Becoming such a presence does not happen overnight. It emerges from consistent adjustments in behavior and mindset. Walk with deliberate pace. Allow pauses in conversation rather than racing to fill them. Speak only when your words add value. Protect your time as if it were a limited resource because it is. Develop competence in areas that matter to you and maintain the discipline required to refine those skills. Each of these actions may appear small on its own, yet together they gradually reshape the geometry of your social world. Eventually, others begin to sense that you operate according to a different internal structure. They recognize that you are not easily swayed by temporary opinions or emotional pressure. This realization generates a mixture of respect and caution. The intimidation they feel is not fear of harm but awareness that you cannot be easily manipulated. You have become psychologically sovereign. In a society where many individuals drift between influences, the person who stands firm becomes a landmark. While trends and expectations flow around them like water around stone, their direction remains constant. Such individuals are rare precisely because maintaining that level of independence requires discipline and self-reflection. Yet the reward is significant. When you no longer depend on approval to define your value, your energy becomes available for building something meaningful. Confidence in this sense is not a fragile emotion that appears and disappears with circumstances. It is a tool forged through deliberate practice. Every boundary you maintain strengthens it. Every skill you master sharpens it. Every moment you remain calm under pressure reinforces it. Over time, this tool becomes part of your identity. You carry it quietly, using it not to dominate others but to protect the integrity of your own path. When that transformation is complete, you no longer feel the need to perform confidence for the crowd. Your actions speak clearly enough. You move through the world with the composure of someone who knows where he is going and why. And in that composure lies the ultimate form of influence, the quiet certainty of a person who governs himself.